Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2. It's a challenge, Kakarot.
When regarding key management, if the player were to teleport defensively, he is rewarded with a boost in blast stock recovery. So it is already much different than the predecessor Budokai expectation. The difference in skill requirement: timing. Of course, timing is a requirement in Budokai 3's defensive teleportation system, but as pretty much any attack can be teleported, not all attacks require a great deal of timing to defend in terms of teleportation. In Tenkaichi 2, every attack that can be teleported defensively requires a decent deal of timing. Now, while the obviousness of defensive teleportation can be seen with charged melee and hooks, Super Blasts present themselves in a bit of a variety and must be dealt with accordingly. So let us walk through such differences. The first type of blast is the Kamehameha. The Kamehameha type blast is a single blast that may vary in blast radius, directed at the targeted opponent. The further away the point of initiation, the easier it is to time the teleport, as the mind has time to adapt to the changes in depth perception. If the attack is closer, one must simply use the judgment of distance, which, if even slightly miscalculated, will result with chip damage or full impact. Pressing circle right before the attack makes contact will result with a defensive teleport to the side. The second type of blast is the Death Beam. The Death Beam type blast is dealt in the same manner as the Kamehameha type blast, but it is important to note that these type of blasts are sometimes presented as unblockable attacks. Therefore, if the player chooses to defend against it, it would be best to teleport defensively, or move out of the way completely via side dash. Reverting back to the just hold block mentality of traditional gaming is not advisable. The third type of blast would be bladed. These blasts are usually unblockable. Therefore, one must learn to defend against them via teleportation and do it well. Some characters may release more than one blade per blast, most of which will also follow the Heat Seeker style. If one were to evade through dashing, one can do so with side Dragon Dash, but there is no guarantee, and it also costs ki to Dragon Dash. One would do well to learn proper defense via teleportation. However, as more than one blade may be released per blast, one must understand that multiple teleports may be required. This alone requires a much higher level of defensive timing than other fighting games. The fourth type is the Super Explosive Wave. Defending this attack via teleportation is one of the more exciting skills one can obtain. For quite some time, many players in the Tenkaichi community were unaware that this attack could be defended via teleportation. The first time it was presented to the community was by a player known as Renegade TX 2001, and was later integrated into live combat by a player known as Sprawlers. For those who are unaware of this accomplishment, think of Daigo's Evo moment number 37, when he countered through Chun-Li's entire hyper combo. If I could relate this defensive technique to anything else, it would be the Super Explosive Wave teleportation sequence. Over the years, this ability has become simply another defensive tactic within the arsenal of top Tenkaichi players. The fifth type is the Rush Attack. Executing a successful teleport against a rush attack is fairly difficult. It acts as a projectile super blast, but the character is presented as the blast and ignores the base guard altogether. The difficulty of defending this attack via teleportation varies from character to character, for rush attacks are presented with various speeds, range, and directional controls as explained earlier. As super blasts are typically displayed as blasts and beams of light, it is easier for the mind to pick up on changes of depth perception than a character's rush attack that also varies in speed, range, and directional control. However, just like a blast or beam, the defensive teleportation is still executed in the same manner. Right before the attack makes contact, one would press circle to defensively teleport out of the attack. The sixth type is the Volley Blast. Volley blasts tend to vary in accuracy, but launch several blasts that may require defense. A player must acknowledge how many blasts are expected to make contact during the blast as they approach. Once this is accomplished, the player may or may not have to teleport through multiple blasts, like the bladed super blast. The 7th type of blast is the Berserker. At this point in time, performing a successful teleportation sequence to defend against this attack is probably the most difficult defensive thing to do during combat, more so than the Super Explosive Wave. While the Super Explosive Wave requires the player to teleport several times in succession, the timing is the same throughout the attack, regardless of the player's physical position. The Berserker is a projectile attack with high accuracy and requires the defender to teleport through multiple blasts. Therefore, it is somewhat of a combination of the Super Explosive Wave's teleport succession requirement, the blast volley quantity if not more, and the beam accuracy. To my knowledge, no other fighting game, save Tenkaichi 3, includes the potential of such defensive capability, traditional or otherwise. To teleport defensively, one must acknowledge exactly when the first attack will land and preemptively press circle to teleport. Once teleported, the player must be ready to teleport through the next attack and so on until the attack has concluded. Remember, this type of attack, when executed by Super Android 17, will continually re-engage the opponent via orientation, so one may need to teleport throughout the entirety of the attack. The 8th type of blast is Explosive. This blast is much like the Super Explosive Wave in that it also requires the player to dodge multiple blasts within a certain vicinity. However, it is much harder to time, as the execution is much different than that of the Super Explosive Wave. The 9th type is the Energy Ball. The Energy Ball blast type is what we would recognize as the Big Bang attack, or even the Spirit Bomb. These attacks are large and powerful concentrated balls of ki that are used as super blast projectiles in which the player must judge the exact position of the attack prior to defensive teleportation. While the timing required is no more difficult than that of the blast or the beam, the circumference of such a blast may require a player to teleport more than once to successfully dodge the attack. Defensive timing and skill regarding depth perception is much higher in Tenkaichi 2 than in the Budokai games. The fact that key management is not necessary for defensive teleportation does not lessen the value of defensive teleportation against the attacks that require it. That being said, this does not go so far as to say key management is not required within the teleportation system of Tenkaichi 2. This will be further explained as we work our way into offensive teleportation. Next, we have the auto teleportation. As explained before, the defensive teleportation is built strictly on timing. In the case of the auto teleport, we can only consider super blasts that include buffer animation. The buffer animation takes place with attacks in which the camera gets close on the character during activation, also known as the close-up animation. If positioned within or near the step-in barrier and the opponent initiates a super blast with buffer animation, the auto teleport can be performed to escape the attack. This is performed by acknowledging when the buffer animation takes place and immediately pressing and holding the guard button. As the attack is unleashed, the time required for the player's character to acknowledge the initiation of guard will align perfectly within the time window of defensive teleportation. Therefore, if an opponent performs a volley blast, he will first initiate the attack via buffer animation. If the player begins holding guard during the buffer animation and continues to hold guard, he will automatically dodge the first blast of the volley. If the volley blasts are grouped tightly enough, the player will dodge all blasts of the volley with a single teleport. Last, we have the last chance defense. On the other end of the auto teleport, a player can also begin teleporting defensively against extended super blasts while blocking an attack if timed correctly. For example, if a player were facing Super Android 17 and held guard while the opponent unleashed a Hell's Storm attack, the player can block the first part of the blast and then begin to defensively teleport through the remainder of the attack. This requires an understanding of when the attack is expected to end. However, if not timed correctly, an attempt to dodge the tail end of the attack may result with a single teleport into receiving damage. Now that the defensive teleportation system has been explained, I think this is a good transitional point to explain the defensive side of the step-in, but we will get into that in our next episode. For now, this is ZeroAnnihilated, and you are watching Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2 Evolution.